And we are back for another exciting segment of Battle of the Ballads. I am here with Gregory and Joseph of the Brothers Dilcox, and I just love that name still. It fits. Uh, this is the highlight of my week every Tuesday night, getting together with these gentlemen and just talking music as people should. And we've got quite a bit of interaction, gentlemen. I don't know if you saw on the Facebook, but quite a few people chimed in on what they think our top song should be.
I did, and I hopped in quite a bit. It's funny because people were bringing up some of the issues we've already talked, singles versus albums,
Release dates.
so very interesting.
Yes. So I want to give a few of them a shout out, and I think it's pretty cool because it's all over the damn place. We got my guy Jeremy Newton who said "achy breaky heart," but he's more of a hip hop dude, so I'm wondering if he was kidding.
Well,
Um,
he hit the cry and laugh emoji, and
okay,
I understand it's a corny as hell song, but Jeremy "Achy Breaky Heart" was one of the top songs of 1992, without a doubt. I mean, the cultural impact and the fact that it's still relevant today. I mean, kids know that song today. I'm assuming.
it's at all my all my family cookouts. I will say that. Not my.
It was one of my last cuts off my short list, one of the very last cuts.
Oh man, I can't wait to talk about our short list and how this should have probably been 3 episodes for 1 year, but we'll get there. Kelly, she gave us at first she said "These Are Days" or "Tears in Heaven," but then she settled on "Night Swimming" by her favorite band REM, which Greg brought up a couple REM songs in the last episode, I believe.
I marked this whole album as something, and I was originally going to throw shade at Kelly because she mentioned "Man on the Moon" and "Everybody Hurts" as her least favorite songs in the album, and those are two of my favorite songs. But upon re-listening to that album, I can understand someone feeling that those are the two lesser. That Saw album is just top notch from beginning to end, definitely the best REM album in my opinion. So I understand it, and also Man of the Moon still holds up to for me, but I was feeling a little bit less about Everybody Hurts this listen.
So I only like a handful of REM songs, but my main one is "What's Your Frequency, Kenneth." That's like one of the few that I can actually get down with. And Orange Crush. So it's always interesting to me to have the REM talk because when I go back and I'm like, I think that was a good album. Then I listen to them like, nah, not for me. But I get why people are into it. Sherry gave us "I Die Without You," PM Dawn, which I'm a huge PM Dawn fan, as I revealed last episode, or "Constant Craving" by Katie Lang. And then she brought up En Vogue, whom I love, and the Never Gonna Get a song, which every time I hear that, it's in my head for a week. So definitely props for that. Charlene gave us "Rhythm is a Dancer." Steve Moore gave us Annie Lennox, "Walking on Broken Glass." I'm going to be honest, gentlemen. I listened to that entire Annie Lennox album at one point while making my list just because her voice is just so amazing and incredible. And that song, "Why?" Oh my God. What a freaking album.
I think "Walking on Broken Glass" is my favorite song for her, from her, and I didn't put it on my short list just because, as we'll get into it, our short lists are going to be so long, and I knew we'd mention it here. But like, that's a straight banger.
So
Okay.
it did make my short list, but Snap did not. That was also one of my final cuts. So
Interesting. Tony, who we had a really spirited discussion with on some rock, he gave us John Cicada, "Just Another Day," Boys to Men, "End of the Road." I almost said Boys in the Hood. Guns N' Roses, "November Rain," and Gin Blossoms, "Hey Jealousy," which I believe all of those songs actually made my short list as well. But we had some really good dialogue with Tony, just going back and forth on some stuff.
Well, and Tony was active in the comments here on YouTube too, so
Oh
thank
yeah,
you,
I love it.
Tony. He also mentioned "Anything Off Core" by Stone Temple Pilots, and I teased that I had a Stone Temple Pilots take. And if you guys recall, a couple episodes back, I mentioned OMD is the only band I accept initial abbreviations for, and I think less of Stone Temple Pilots because of the frequency in which STP is used as an abbreviation, since I hate the word abbreviations. So
The
in my
Motorola.
mind, in my mind, Stone Temple Pilots always like a half a step back than they should be because I hate that abbreviation for them. But Core is a great album, so he is correct there.
And speaking of,
so you would hate Suicidal Tendencies because they just go by ST, and it's even shorter for no reason.
Well, in Suicidal Tendencies has a double because I see ST, I think self-titled. It doesn't even, I don't think street, I think self-titled when I see ST. So
and Tony, I'm going to try and have him on in a couple weeks. He's doing a cool rock depression uh, music fueled fundraiser for depression awareness. So I think it'll be perfect to tie in here. He's using a lot of awesome songs, so I'm going to give him a few minutes with us.
Oh, that's awesome.
One of
I
our
mean,
episodes.
Tony, what's your favorite year in the 90s? Come on for a whole episode with us.
It'd be amazing. Ironically, he's one of my former students, and he's grown into a friend. It's pretty cool how it happened. I love it. But Paul Brenner from Joywave, he gave us "Killing in the Name," Rage Against the Machine. Steve Jackson gave us "Domino" by Kiss, which I'm always interested in people give Kiss from that year, the no makeup era, because they got so much shit during that time, but they actually released quite a few solid songs.
Kiss is a gimmick band to me forever and always. I mean, there's a reason they paid WCW, like paid them to have a wrestler, because Kiss is a gimmick band and always will be, except for the song Beth.
I love Beth. Shots fired, Steve. I know you have a lot to say, given that it's your favorite band, so I need to see those comments. Drew Thompson, he gave us "Unholy" by Kiss, "Sex Type Thing" by STD, and "Damn That River" by Alice in Chains. And truth be told, I rocked all of them after he wrote that, because I hadn't listened to any of those in a long time. David Simmons came back with "Baby Got Back" and "November Rain," along with "Under the Bridge." And Nicole Cisnales gave us Tori Amos' "Crucify." And I forgot that was the year that Tori really broke on the scene for a lot of people. And I think Lilith Fair started shortly after that. And that sort of era of music that ushered in a lot of the female vocalists of the 90s. So solid list to start. And I don't know if you guys agree with me, but I seriously had such a hard time getting rid of songs on this. This could have easily been 3 episodes, in my opinion, just for the year 1992.
So by my old self-imposed rules of 10 additional songs per year, I would have had 3 episodes worth. I had 31 originally when I went through and was just like, okay, this is my small list. 31. Go ahead.
Oh no, finish your thought.
I was just going to say, and part of it I think is because 92 seemed like such, and Gregory and I talked about this a little last night, it seemed such quintessentially 90s. When I think of 90s music, there's a number of like genres I think of. There's like that 90s rap sound. There's the rise of the female vocalists, as you already mentioned, which a few of them will show up here. And then you start getting into more of the, I don't know, like adult pop rock type things like Gin Blossoms, Matchbox 20, Delamitri. They all kind of started in this era, and those are kind of the sounds, and this was so quintessentially that. Oh, and like the dance pop things as well.
Oh yeah. I'm going to be honest too. What I did is I had pretty much every song that was mentioned by everybody, and just to not be too repetitive, I deleted them all off my list, which did help me get down to like a page and a half. And so what I'm going to do with the 2 of you gentlemen as well is, if you have stuff that's on my list, I'm going to be like, yep, that's on mine, and I'm just going to delete it from mine. That way it's not too repetitive about it, because there's a lot of songs to get through on this one.
Yeah, well, and the nice part, I have the advantage that my 84 list was so long, because that was originally when we were going to do one a year. So my short list for 84 was 30. So I've gotten pretty good at shrinking short lists, but even this, my short list is super long. But since we are doing just one year, it gives us time to talk about songs just off the short list too. So
I'm curious if we all have the same song on our list, and if you could guess what I'm thinking.
For a song of the year?
Not for song of the year, but a song that made the list. And I say this as Canadian music fans. I'm curious if you can.
So I have 3 different Canadian things on mine, but I think you're probably thinking of Tragically Hip.
Indeed, I am.
I have 100th Meridian on my short list for Tragically Hip.
I also have at the 100th Meridian.
I do as well. All right.
Yeah, I had a feeling we were going to, and it was almost when I left off. But since we are Canadian band stands here.
Yes.
I'm going to go ahead and exit now because we already mentioned it.
I've been listening to hip all week too as a result. So it's some Gordy love. So, Gregory, let's start with you. You're at the top of the screen here. 1992, my friend. Let's break it down.
I was about to suggest I go first because I know Joe's song of the year has a lot of personal significance to him. So this way he gets time to collect himself and then time with you to buffer afterwards. So yeah, my short list is going to be long, but Tears in Heaven, Clapton, and I teased on Kelly's response that I have a story about me crying. And there was a weekend, for whatever reason, unlike my siblings, I did not spend the weekend with my father. And I was on a trip with my mother, and this song came on, and I said I really liked it. And she told me the story about Clapton's son passing away, and like I just started like bawling into that in the car during that ride. And so, just a real emotional moment for little 6-year-old Gregory at that time listening to the song. So I've always been one to cry at the medium of music really quickly. As anyone who listens to our podcast on the MCU knows, I also cry at the MCU too. So I just cry. I cry at commercials. I cry at Sports Center. It doesn't matter. I am very much a crier, and I'm perfectly okay with that. But Baby Got Back, Sir Mix-a-Lot. I mean, you can clown the song if you want. You can clown Sir Mix-a-Lot if you want, but there's a reason this song has been playing at school dances and weddings ever since it was released. Tennessee Arrested Development. Dan, I know you love this whole album, but I've never been able to get into the whole album, but Tennessee is just a top-notch, like all-time great song.
I think that has one of the best hooks of any song in that era, to be honest. Just it's one of those songs where you forget that you heard it before, and then it comes on instantly. You're taken back. It's like, oh, yep, I'm in the car. Listen to this.
I also had that on my list, but I axed it specifically because I knew or had a really good feeling one of you two would bring up Arrested Development. Maybe not that song specifically, but I was like, okay, I could safely remove this one from my list.
Yeah, they're when it comes to groups of all time, they're in my top 10. I absolutely, and they didn't even they didn't have a lot of material. I just absolutely adore that band.
Yeah. In Vogue was mentioned, but for me, the song of the year from In Vogue was Free Your Mind.
Yes.
That was just that song. Listening to it today, it's still like, it's just as perfect today as it was back when I heard it as a child. I can't promise you I heard it in 92, but when I heard it as a child. Cop Killer, Body Count, the significance of that song and the fact that Barbara Bush went at Ice-T after that song is huge. It was a really early example of gaslighting that politicians will do with media, something I'd mentioned in my Cool Points newsletter this past Friday. Cool Points newsletter on Facebook, search it, subscribe, read it. I'd mentioned the gaslighting with music and that was just a huge issue. Remember, Barbara Bush wasted US tax dollars to go at Ice-T and Body Count over this song, and it was a song. And of course, honestly, now the cops are the killers. Jump.
This is after Tipper Gore spent the 80s going after Luke Skywalker from Two Live Crew.
Yeah.
It wasn't a good few years for hip hop.
Yeah.
Warning labels.
On the opposite end of the spectrum, Jump, Crisscross, just a classic song. The Inside Out clothing, like super corny, but I love it. I did it in high school for a couple times.
Another one I removed because I knew you would put it on there.
I think I missed the bus from Crisscross.
Yeah.
My Crisscross jam.
So What You Want, Beastie Boys, which is like an all-time hip-hop classic as well. Damn, I Wish You're My Lover, Sophie B. Hawkins.
Yes.
I love that song. It's a go-to on any bar jukebox for me. It has gotten us free drinks for playing it because someone's like, oh, is this Sophie B. Hawkins? And like just giving us drinks before.
I believe you mean Susan B. Anthony.
Yes. Also just a great Community episode, even in the Gaslight season, or the Gas Leak season, not the Gaslight. Friday I'm in Love, another just perfect Cure song.
Make the list
we mentioned Achy Breaky Heart earlier. I'll Be There, featuring Trey Lawrence from Mariah Carey on the Unplugged. And this was the start of the rise of Unplugged, which dominated so much of the 90s. And I know they still like break it out every once in a while, but Unplugged isn't the same as it was now because everyone does acoustic covers. They're all over Spotify. So, but I feel like this version of I'll Be There was just Mariah letting loose, and we saw the Mariah she was going to become for, I mean, the rest of her career, but definitely through that mid to late 90s stretch. Jump Around, House of Pain. It's another one that you can't avoid. On the opposite, like the more low-key Headbanger, EPMD, featuring K Solo and Redman. I listened to the Redman debut album, was in 1992, and I re-listened to it because I couldn't like place any of the songs off of it. And it's not a bad album, but you can definitely hear the transition from like what is 80s hip hop to 90s hip hop in that album.
Without a doubt.
But other debut albums, Blind Melon, the Stone Temple Pilots, which we've mentioned, Common, Insane Clown Posse, the Rage Against the Machines, and the Dr. Dre solo album, which is just an insane album. Joe's probably going to talk about this band at length in a moment, but If I Had $1 Million, Bare Naked Ladies, the best album song off that album. I didn't realize I was into Bare Naked Ladies until a few years ago when I saw them. And I only saw them because Colin Hay was the opener, and then they were playing with the Violent Femmes. And it was such a good lineup that I just couldn't help it. And they put on a really good live show. And then they brought Colin Hay out to play a song of his with them.
Oh, that's cool.
And then they brought the Violent Femmes out to play a song with them. And then they all came out and they played. I actually think it may have been If I Had $1 Million, and Colin Hay sang it. And it was just like a great moment of synergy between just people who wanted to be on stage.
Greg and I actually a few years ago found a mutual love of Colin Hay. We didn't know that we were each other were fans, so that was another musical talking point for us.
I only met him briefly when I bought a couple of the records at that show, but he was so lovely in person for that couple minutes.
He has some of the most touching songs I think I've ever heard.
Yeah, and the fact that he's Irish but lived in Australia, and so he has like both accents at time. Like it's just a phenomenal person.
Colin Hay plug, if you haven't listened to Overkill out there, the listeners, do it.
Yeah. No Rain, Blind Melon, which was another potential like song of the year for me. Plush, Stone Temple Pilots. I mentioned The Automatic for the People, like any song off that album, honestly. Runaway Train, Soul Asylum. What's Up, Four Non Blondes, which that album's another like straight banger. My friend Chris and I listened to it one Tuesday night, leaving trivia to go find a place to dance on a Tuesday night. We were listening to Four Non Blondes, and we did not find a good place to dance on a Tuesday night, but listening to Four Non Blondes as loud as possible in her car made that night for me. I'm Every Woman and I Will Always Love You from Whitney Houston off that Bodyguard soundtrack. But like when we get to soundtracks, 92 is going to be a year because you have Aladdin, Sister Act, The Bodyguard, Wayne's World, Singles, which is like the grunge movie soundtrack, and Malcolm X, which is just like filled with jazz icons. Billie Holiday being my favorite artist on that. It Was a Good Day, Ice Cube. The three of us routinely quote that song. I know that for a fact. Passing Me By, Farside. I forgot it was released that early, but that's just an absolutely timeless track. Polly, Nirvana, and then Let Me Ride and Nothing But a G Thing are my favorite two tracks off that Dr. Dre album. Bitches Ain't Shit is great, but problematic, and I think the Ben Folds tongue-in-cheek cover of it is a little bit better.
It's so good.
Rump Shaker, Rex and Effect. And then these next two songs I think of kind of together, Connected, Stereo MC, and Rhythm as a Dancer, Snap. Those could both be potential songs of the year for me, but they both come in at over 5.5 minutes. And that's fine when you're in the club and you are dancing, but it is hard for me to keep interest in like just the repeating beat and chorus that those songs have for more than like 4 minutes. And I think, Rhythm as a Dancer, like it was at 5 minutes and 15 seconds. I'm like, I'm still listening to this song because if you are not dancing, at some point you want the song to cut off. But perfect dance tracks.
That Stereo MC song's actually on every running playlist I make because I actually just get lost in it because it just keeps repeating and everything, and I forget what I'm doing.
So
I definitely see how you can trance out to that one.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
And if you have that movement, much just about what Joe was saying about the sound, I didn't mention any of the songs on the short list because I just want to talk about it as a whole. But Amy Grant had quite a year in 1992. There's something about the early 90s sound that was perfect for her voice. But the top 10 albums of 92, one was REM's Automatic for the People, two was Rage Against the Machine, self-titled, Pavement, Slanted and Enchanted. And I mean, I know that Pavement is underrated. There was like none of my favorite Pavement songs come off this album. Alice in Chains, Dirt, Tori Amos, Little Earthquakes, Dre's Chronic, Faith No More, Angel Dust, Sublime, 40 Ounce to Freedom, Sonic Youth, Dirty, and Beastie Boys, Check Your Head. So yeah, this is like the first year we've saw 91 being dominated by grunge. 4 of the top 5 albums of the year were grunge, but this is the year where so much was charting for the music that just dominated the 90s.
Yep.
So it made this really hard. I told Joe earlier that as of noon, I hadn't decided what my song of the year was. I mean, how many potential song of the years did I just mention? And those were just the ones I mentioned as I was going. But for me, and it's not my favorite song off this album or in this movie, but I Can Show You the World, Aladdin. My favorite song, like if you think Disney songs, this is one of the first that pop into your mind. Aladdin was the beginning of the Disney Renaissance in the 90s, and the whole soundtrack is great, but I Can Show You the World's the one I think that gets the most play and the most culturally significant of it, and plus the Ruben Studdard cover of it in the second season of American Idol is just that velvet teddy bear. He wins me over.
So Peebo Bryson took the year for you.
Yeah. So I mean, I love Aladdin as an animated feature. It's top 5 Disney films for me.
Awesome.
And that song it's the start of what's to come for Disney. It played such a huge role in my childhood and even in my adult life. It's a song I go to regularly still. So, and it may have defaulted in there because it was so hard for me to narrow it down, but I don't think it lessens how important that song is to the soundtrack and to the 90s. So
not at all. Threw me for yet another loop, and I'm crossing that off my list now. We haven't.
Hey Zoe.
So she's not sleeping. Before we started, I messaged the gentleman that she was asleep, and indeed my monster is not. So Greg, what I've been doing is I've been crossing off every song that's being named thus far, and so I now need to take that off. But I still have one left from Aladdin, so I'm happy about that. Unless Joe steals it from me. So Joe, I am so pumped for the story that you've been hanging for.
Okay. Well, let me just recap real quick. I'm not going to talk about any of these, but just do a quick running list of the things that were already mentioned that I also had on my list. A Whole New World, Aladdin. Friday I'm in Love, The Cure. Jump, Crisscross, Jump Around, House of Pain, No Rain, Nothing But a G Thing. Plush by STP, although this one was tough because I had Creep on here originally, and then I just couldn't decide between the two of them. Rhythm is a Dancer, Man on the Moon, Runaway Train, Tennessee, Walking Unbroken Glass, What's Up, Achy Breaky Heart, At the 100th Meridian, So What You Want, Killing in the Name Of. Those were just all on my list that have already been said. I skipped a couple of them because I do want to talk about a couple of them a little bit more at length, even though they've already been mentioned. So next would be Gin Blossoms. I'm a huge Gin Blossoms fan. I own multiple of their records. This one was tough because when I look at that album was so good. I believe it's got 4 of my favorite songs: Hey Jealousy, Allison Road. I think Follow You Down's on that one, or that might be on the next one.
Too.
It's so good. Bare Naked Ladies. This was another one. I forget how much I like Bare Naked Ladies until I review just off of that album, which doesn't even have all of my favorites. Brian Wilson, Be My Yoko Ono, Enid, What a Good Boy, and If I Had $1 Million. Of those, for sure, it's Brian Wilson. I think I said
Mine too.
Before. I love that song. It's so good.
It's one of my favorite songs.
I Will Always Love You. We've already talked about a little bit, but I appreciate this song so much. And it's interesting because when people think of it, normally it's kind of towards the end of that song when Whitney Houston's hitting those really big, powerful notes and she's just like blowing the speakers out. She's turning it up to 11. But if you listen to that song, even in the beginning, the vocal runs are just amazing. Even when she's not like belting out things, just her runs are just phenomenal. That song just takes me away every time I hear it.
Well, not only everything about the vocals on that song, but the fact that the video tied into the movie. I know such a powerful part of the movie when she's like performing it intercut with other parts of the movie. It was such great synergy between artist, actress, movie, video, everything. Like it's chilling. The Bodyguard was an early favorite movie for me, and
How about the control in her voice? Because I mean, she performed that live at just about every possible venue she could after that. And how about just the raw control she had? I remember the first time I heard her live on, I don't know if it was the Grammys or Billboard Awards, what it was, but holy shit, we had heard it everywhere on the radio, but to just hear her belt it out with no music behind her, like God.
Yeah. Well, and the fact that the Dolly Parton original is great, but sounds nothing like what she did. She made it an entirely different song by the strength of her vocals and just, whew.
Yeah.
So originally this was my choice. Like when I first like opened things up without doing any digging, it was immediately, nope, this one's it because it's supreme. Until I realized that there's another song that came out this year that is just the one. Send Me on My Way, Rusted Root. The song it makes me happy. Like you hear that song and I smile and I just want to move around to it. Another one of our Canadian guys, Tom Cochrane, Life is a Highway.
Yep.
Wonderful, wonderful song. What else do I have on here that hasn't been mentioned? We Got a Love Thing. I don't know if we've mentioned CeCe Pennington yet. But We Got a Love Thing was this year. That's another one that just kind of makes me smile when it's played. Ain't Too Proud to Beg, TLC. That one's up there. We already mentioned Killing in the Name of. The Freshman, the Verve Pipe. This is another one that's interesting because what?
That was 92?
It was ish. So their EP was released in 1992, and the original 10-track recording had The Freshman on it. And then they re-released it in 96 on Villains. So it was, I decided to count it for this year because it wasn't just a single, it was on a released EP. But it was re-released in 96 on their Villains album, which is actually fantastic from beginning to end.
And I did the opposite. I was saving it for Villains, but I left Gin Blossoms off on this year, partially because I knew Joe was going to mention it, but my favorite Gin Blossom songs were on the release in 80, which, do you guys know the story about that?
Ones that came out in 89?
Yeah. Yeah, the fact that it was like released with the songwriter and guitarist who didn't end up signing the major record when they re-recorded it and ended up killing himself a couple of years later. Like it's for like, and then if you listen lyrically, the songs sound poppy and happy, but no, they're just, it's so heartbreaking, which since we're in the 90s, Rob Hervella goes in detail about this story on 60 Songs That Made the 90s, which is a Spotify original podcast. And it's literally what it is. He spends 15 to 20 minutes talking about a different song each week and then plays the song. He gets a variety of experts. And I think that Gin Blossoms was my favorite episode of his so far. The Wu-Tang one is pretty good as well. That might be second. Maybe the Atlantis might be second. But yeah, so just the Gin Blossoms always make me think of Rob Hervella's, who's a great music critic in general. But listening to him talk about this on Spotify, songs of the 90s, just kind of a perfect time to mention it as we're digging into the 90s in detail. But yeah, go check that out, folks.
Definitely.
I'll have to. I haven't seen that or listened to that, so I might have to go check that out. And so that actually brings me to my number one of the year. Again, this one might fall under a slightly controversial pick because it technically first came out on a soundtrack in 1991, but then was re-recorded in 92 and released on their Unplugged. And so this was the first of the actual artists' albums it was released on. And it's Tears in Heaven, Eric Clapton. And this, I probably will end up crying, and I apologize ahead of time for that. Um, but this song just hits me in a different way than almost any other song that's ever been written. Um, the summer after sophomore year in college, one of my close friends passed away, and one of our other friends was in an a cappella group at RIT, the 8-beat measure, and that semester, the semester following Evan's death, one of the guys surprised the group with an arrangement of this song so that they could dedicate it to Evan and another friend that they had lost. And so we drove down to RIT for their Halloween show. And I remember sitting in their theater, and it just completely broke me a second time. And I'm sitting there next to Josh, and I'm just openly weeping in this theater because it was just so raw. And every time I hear that song, it hits me all over again, and it almost like re-breaks me every time I hear it. And so it's hard for me to actually finish the song any of the times it comes on, but it just means so much to me, and it just hits me in a completely different way than just about any other song that's ever been released. It's just different.
Damn. That's just such a story. Amazing. And to have that connection to a song and to music and let those tears out anytime. That's wow.
Woo! Dance turn.
Hey, that's that healthy shit right there. I love that for you, man. That's pretty powerful. I think when we get to this year, I don't know if I'll be able to beat that no matter what. When it comes to our votes, that's some powerful ass shit right there. Just to
Well, in the same way that we ended up voting at times our favorite songs for a year, but then understanding cultural impact often will trump that when you start talking about songs of the decade. I have a feeling when we get to that, that's going to be a similar type situation. Although I'll still vote for it.
well, you just rocked the stadium in my heart, man. That was fucking awesome. And now I get to follow that. Thanks, Dick. No, I'm kidding.
Named Gregory. He's the one who pitched the order.
Wow.
Well, to be fair, on the NoCo Defenders podcast, Dan just kept railroading poor Tim, making Tim follow him, even when I was trying to get the order to let Tim speak first. So
I had a lot to say.
don't you always?
Yeah, I should probably shut the fuck up every now and then. All right, so I have crossed off everything that's been said, and my list is now manageable. So I had the Bare Naked Ladies, Brian Wilson. That's one of my favorite songs. That was my very short list, and I'm not a big Bare Naked Ladies fan, but that song just slaps. I just absolutely love it. I saw them with Hootie a couple summers ago, and that was just a great show. It was hard for me to differentiate from some albums here. So like I had Ooh on the TLC tip as just the whole album. I mean, it's start to finish. That's one of my favorite albums of all time. It had Hat to the Back, Ain't Proud to Bag. One of my friends, just so good. Megadeth, Architecture of Aggression. I think they were kind of forgotten about a lot because there's a lot of fighting in their band, and then Metallica was also on the scene, so that made things a little difficult. Dream Theater had Another Day, which again, it's one of those little known bands. I just happen to really love them.
On the Dream Theater thing, my friend Paco, Ryan, he has been illustrating a graphic novel to Dream Theater. And so we would have drunken nights where he would make me sit in his car with him while he described the scene he was going to illustrate to different Dream Theater songs. And I want to mock him for it, but I loved it. It was always like so beautiful and the passion he had for it. So I'm not a huge Dream Theater fan myself, but I have a soft place in my heart for those drunken nights with him.
That's awesome. The 40 Ounces of Freedom Sublime album, it's my favorite Sublime album. It's one of my top 10 albums of all time. Bad Fish, Date Rape, It's just Smoke Two Joints. I mean, that album just slaps. So that's on there. Beautiful Girl by NXS. I think I've expressed numerous times NXS is one of my favorite bands, and they early 90s, they were all over the place. Not one of my favorites, but I think it's important. Bed of Roses, Bon Jovi. It's hard to go to any towny bar and not hear it, I guess. So it's still relevant today. The Ghetto Boys with Damn It Feels Good to Be a Gangsta. That just always great. Now, Greg, I see your Aladdin song, and I take Friend Like Me from Sir Robin Williams. That's definitely my song off that soundtrack. I actually had a lot of fun in my office on my lunch break just listening to it the other day and just remembering how fun that freaking soundtrack was.
Yeah, that soundtrack is just, it's so good.
Yeah, it still holds up today, despite all the other soundtracks we've had after it. It just still really holds up today.
I was thinking about that soundtrack though, or that movie, when I was doing my list for this. And I feel like it's maybe I'm misremembering the whole movie because I didn't go back and I didn't review the soundtrack, but I feel like the second half of that movie just stops being a musical. Like the first half is so packed with song after song, and then like it hits the middle when him and Genie fight, and then like the only singing is the kind of mocking singing Jafar does, and that's it. It just stops being a musical at some point.
Yeah, you're not wrong. It's mostly just like overtures and including the Jafar's singing, but yeah, it does kind of. And this is the first one where I think people just associate Disney animated films with being musicals, but they really weren't. I mean, Little Mermaid to a huge extent was, but that was really it. Like they had music, but they weren't musicals. But people like think, oh, Snow White was a musical. No, it wasn't. It had a musical number in a movie. So, and I think this was really where they're figuring it out because from here you see, I mean, the other Aladdin movies, I feel like the soundtracks aren't as good. So we're gonna forget those existed for this conversation. But you have Lion King where the music goes throughout and is clearly part of the story. And Joe and I's personal favorite, A Goofy Movie, like is a straight musical. So this was that first of that era that just becomes Disney musicals, which really kind of stretches through and almost sunk Toy Story since Pixar did not want it to be a musical. So
it's had some Randy Newman numbers. I don't know if you saw this in one of our Messina nights, but I used to love to get drunk and just do the Aladdin soundtrack start to finish. And I don't know if I did that at any nights at Roy's, but that was definitely, I had like a 2-year span where that was just my go-to. And I don't know why. I'm not proud of it, but I'm not ashamed either. The next song on my list was How Do You Talk to an Angel, Jamie Walters and the Heights, Jamie Walters of 90210 fame. I was obsessed with 90210. I wore flannels and jeans just like Mr. Jamie Walters. I bought the cassette tape of this. That was when he was with the Heights. I bought his solo cassette tape and the Heights cassette tape. It had to make my list, and I listen to it now, and I'm like, this song still kind of slaps, to be honest. Like,
did he date Donna in the series? Was that
he did date Donna? But he was an abusive boyfriend for Donna.
Yes. Okay.
As
I mean,
on-screen character.
I always ride hard for Brian Austin Green in that series. So
Donna Martin graduated though. We have Informer by Snow off of 12 Inches of Snow, which that's not even the best song on that album. Lady with a Red Dress On is hands down the best song of that album, but I absolutely love that. I have an autographed copy of that CD for no freaking reason. The Arrested Development, the whole 3 years, 5 months, 2 days in the life of album is one of my favorites. I love it. I listened to it numerous times this week when I wasn't listening to the hip. People Every Day is my favorite song off there. Give a Man a Fish is great. Tennessee is always just a classic, and I can't say enough about that album. We had Opiate from Tool, which I didn't realize came out that year, to be honest. It's really heavy into Tool, not so much anymore. We have, and Greg, I'm surprised you didn't say this one, Protect Your Neck came out. It was released in December of that year on Wu-Tang Records before it was a B-side on the Method Man B-side.
I forgot it was a B-side, to be honest with you. I've already penciled it in as for 1993. So,
and that's when it was released by Wu-Tang on a different label off their own label. And I only know this. as much as I love comic books, I may have as many Wu-Tang books as I have comic books. So it's I couldn't not usher it in, but it is going to be on my 93 list as well. Real Love, Mary J. Blige. God, that was almost my song, actually. I absolutely love that track. We did Rest of the Brood already. Sometimes Will Just Ain't Enough, Don Henley, Patti Smith. That's a song I can listen to in any era. Just an amazing, amazing track. And I love hearing it every time it comes on. Supermodel by RuPaul. That had a lot of significance at the time. You had a drag queen with a top 10 single, basically, and that was at all of the MTV summer jams and all that stuff I remember. And RuPaul burst on the scene with that. One of my favorite rock songs, Walk by Pantera. That dropped that year, and that's on pretty much every playlist I have, whether it's Happy Go Lucky or Workout. I just absolutely love that song. We went over the hip already, and I am now at my favorite song off one of my favorite albums, Killing of the Name, Rage Against the Machine. I can't not pick it. I know it's the obvious choice, but it's also a song that, for being released when it was, I mean, Bomb Track is a close second off that album for me, but the social implications of that song, Things Are Still the Same. It was actually funny hearing Paul Ryan say he loved Rage Against the Machine, because clearly he didn't know what they were about, but I can't not pick this.
On my list, like the reason I picked it out, I wrote under it, still relevant in stars around it, because it's still it, right? It's just.
Well, when we talk about relevancy, I mentioned this to Paul Brenner's comment when he said Killing of the Name, of how I was trying not to make the obvious pick 2 years in a row, which he'd comment on the obvious pick since he had Smells Like Teen Spirit, but not only like musically and relevance in the year, but I don't think there's a single song in the Rage catalog that's not just as relevant today as it was then.
Yeah.
Which usually when you say that, it's a compliment to the artist. Unfortunately, that's just a sad statement about the world we live in today and how not far we have come. Mm-hmm. That these social political songs, not even just as relevant, maybe more relevant, simply because we now have the technology to further illustrate how prevalent these issues still are.
Some of those that work forces are the same that burn crosses, and the past 3 years, God, have we seen that? So, just holy shit. Yeah, the gravity of the song, every time I've ever heard it, it's on countless playlists of mine. I listen to it nonstop for days on end. It's just such a relevant and important song, and the energy and power and emotion of Zach De La Rocha just solidifies it. So I know it's an obvious choice for many for this year. Real Love, Mary J. almost took it, but I couldn't leave this decade without having this song be it for me.
And one of the reasons it was easy for me to not end up picking it the song of the year is I had a feeling you might, but also that we're going to have to discuss this song anyway. And it's definitely unfortunate that it's still relevant because of the lives, but musically, it's such a great song without the message.
Mm-hmm.
And it's unfortunate that it doesn't feel like we'll ever get to a point where we can listen to that song and appreciate it was a message of the time, but what a great banger it is.
Yeah.
Just
the beginning. I mean, it's the guitar and it's so much different than what we were getting at the time. I mean, and you had this up against the Soundgarden sound, the grunge sound, all that, and they just came out with just raw energy. Fuck you, like here we are. And geez, I had a chance to see them live years ago, and it was absolutely incredible. One of the best experiences of my life. But yeah, just couldn't leave 92 without that one taking it for me.
Well, and you can't really pass up or overlook the fact that Tom Morello then went and got his master's in political science. So, and Zach De La Rocha is still out there preaching these same messages. I mean, he recorded with Chuck D after leaving Rage. And so this meant something to these guys. They weren't just grandstanding with their music. It meant so much, and you can tell that in the music. And for Morello with the guitar, one of my problems with Audioslave is just how insane he is at guitar. And with Audioslave, he's just played the guitar like any other guy in any other alternative band.
Yep.
And then you listen to Rage and you hear what he does and you hear the message, and man, why ever water either of those guys down?
Yeah. No, I just for anybody in the younger audience who hasn't checked anything out on that album beyond that track, I highly recommend it. Start to finish, it's just God, it's absolutely amazing. I feel like we broke down a lot of tracks tonight.
There's one track that I feel like could be nominated as the worst track of the year.
Oh.
And I would like to bring that up. And I think Joe knows because he was singing it the other night.
So
it is catchy as all hell. But
you go ahead, because I can't remember if I have this one. But
okay. I Got a Man.
Oh, what's your man got to do with me?
It's the thing is musically, it's a fun track. I love give and take hip hop. It's one of the reasons I love Kid and Play. But no means no, guys. She doesn't need to have a man. She doesn't need to be gay. If she's not interested, she's not interested. That's the end of the fucking conversation.
Positive K had the skills that pay the bills.
Yeah, and
But she had a man.
Yeah.
Quit trying to get
you. And she didn't need a goddamn excuse. So musically, it's a wonderful song, but it's just one of those things. As much as I do enjoy a back and forth, and I love the beat from that track, and it is one of the catchiest songs in '92. I just cannot listen to that in good conscience now because we're still not listening to victims as a society. And just to hear that, and I know it was played as playful and she got a check to do it, but it doesn't read as playful today. And it's kind of shameful it ever read as playful because, like I said, she doesn't need an excuse. She doesn't need to have a man to not be interested in him. And I mean, he like runs down her man's penis size and brags about his, and it's all very clever lyrically, but I can't get behind it because of the message.
I honestly forgot all about that track until you brought it up. To be honest, I haven't heard it probably in a good 20 years.
So I was listening to a 92 playlist and that song came on, which is why I was singing it after work the other day. And I completely forgot that because it left my brain later that night. And when you said worst track, one of the ones I cut late was I'm Too Sexy by Right Said Fred. And I think that could also be on here. Just because that song's actually terrible.
It didn't make my short list, but I'm glad you mentioned it because I thought for sure one of the two of you would, because I love that song. I still do. It's so bad. And so fun.
There's the part that gets me that I will say is I shake my little tush on the catwalk.
Yes, that was.
It's so dumb.
It was one of my first cuts where I was just like, nope, good.
It's catchy. It's memorable. It comes on, and if you're in the right crowd, it's fun to dance and sing to.
I've been at two awkward weddings where somebody's grandma dances with me to it, and I'm good.
There's a lot of songs that fall into that someone's grandma dances with me at a wedding song. And because I love to be on the dance floor at any occasion, but especially a wedding, I have experienced all of them. This one might be the most fun. This is pure camp in all the glory that is camp for good and bad.
Yeah, that was one of my first ones that got the X. Now, have you guys looked into the future at 1993 yet as we travel in the past?
I haven't. I was struggling with 1992 for too long.
Jesus, 93 gets even tougher.
I know Protect Your Neck was on my short list for 93 at a quick glance, but starting in 94 and 95, a couple underrated bands I love start releasing early albums. So it's going to start getting tough.
94 was a banger of a year too, because even like originally Rusted Root was not on my short list for this year, because that's my favorite Rusted Root song, but they actually re-released it in 94. And if you look on most things like Spotify, they don't even have the 92 release. Right. That album just doesn't exist on Spotify for Rusted Root. It's only the 94. So it was really interesting.
Spotify is wonderful for a lot of things, but also I'd mentioned it with the Smashing Pumpkins when I went to listen to Gish. It was the release in the 2000s that was there. I think I love Elliott Smith, who we are going to get into very shortly as well. But a lot of the Spotify stuff is the re-releases, which is kind of unfortunate because as I buy them on vinyl, they're the remastered stuff, and Elliott Smith is supposed to be raw.
Yeah, they do a lot with Stuffy and Stevens the same way too, which is kind of annoying. Gentlemen, 93 is going to be a banger of a year as well. And I need plugs, Greg. I know you got a lot going on, man. I know Cool Points is out there, and I want to encourage everybody to read this latest Cool Points. I read it a couple times because there's some very pertinent stuff in there, especially a take on Cardi B matter, which I was rather impressed with the handling of. So, Greg, what kind of plugs you got today?
Well, obviously, Cool Points. It's substack.com/Cool Points. And you can subscribe for the email, or you can just read it on the site. But if you subscribe, it lets me know like you're actually truly engaged. And you can even subscribe and never open the email and read it on the page. I'm trying to find more and more of my voice and be less just lists on Cool Points. So you'll notice that. So please read, give feedback. Of course, No Coast Defenders on Spotify, the podcast you and I do with your good buddy Tim, Dan. I thought this was our best episode yet. We brought in my good friend Donald, who Joe, I invited him to come stay with us anytime he wants to come out and have a beer.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was a great talk.
And while on the subject of Donald, his Dumb Marks podcast he does with his cousin Jason, who if Donald comes out, Joe, Jason's probably coming too. I think they're a package deal. And two of their buddies, mostly a wrestling podcast, but they cover a little bit of everything. And it's just kind of fun. Jason in real life is a soft-spoken smartass, so to hear him be more vocal with how big of a smartass he is on this podcast is always really fun. It helps. I love those two guys, but I think the banter between the four of them is great on the podcast. And then Dan, your interview Sunday, I think, not counting the one you did with me, so go rewatch that if you've already watched it, watch it again, keep getting those view counts up. But your interview Sunday was my favorite interview. I haven't seen them all, but my favorite interview so far you've done. I loved the idea of talking about women in comics with a woman. It's something you and I talk about often, about representation when talking about representation.
Yeah.
So that interview with Kimberly, who is also a wrestling fan, Kimberly, go listen to the Dumb Marks podcast. They're big in India. Yeah, those are my plugs. I think that's all of them.
I love it. And Joe, you got yourself a new grill. What do you recommend somebody grill this week, man?
Man, we did steaks and chicken breasts this past weekend. So it was what we had in the house. We didn't have anything that traditionally you would smoke. But I don't know. I kind of want to do a pork tenderloin this weekend. But Amanda doesn't. What was that?
Pork tenderloin. Just throw a ham steak on the grill for her.
I might, because I love a pork tenderloin, but Amanda doesn't. But I don't know. As far as plugs, though, I know I've plugged her the last couple of weeks on here, but Amanda is undertaking a new graphic design venture as well, because she does obviously the commission stuff. If you need logos, go check out the No Coast Defenders logo, and you can see some of her work. But now she is going to be doing basically prints you can buy that will be on the site. And if you like her prints, you can buy them. I think she's doing multiple options where you can either buy and digitally save it and then print it out yourself, or you can actually get prints. So if you're looking for new decorations around the house, liven up your dresser in your bedroom, go check out amandairwin.com.
I'll be getting a custom piece sometime soon here, I believe.
Awesome.
Figure out what I want, and I'll place an order. If you haven't already, please check out Out of the Panel Comics. It's my YouTube channel. It's the one that features this, so I would hope you've checked it out. And the views are rolling in. We have a sponsorship offer, not only for the podcast, but for the YouTube channel, which is pretty cool. It's laughable. I'm not going to bring up the company until we actually sign the deal. But I've had numerous people message me about various video content and things like that. And some people wanting to get on, some people asking, can you interview me? So keep it coming. It's all about the fun, and comment on everything. Comment on here, roast us for our choices. We'll talk right back. And gentlemen, another beautiful, amazing round. And I'm so happy that we have so many more years to go.
Same. I was thinking about it. I was like, if we've got over 6 months longer of just this version of the podcast, I needed to have better background here. So,
And I have
Amanda
one
and I
more
are switching
order.
our desks.
I have one more order to add to your collection. I'll be sending it once it gets here.
That's awesome. You're too sweet.
Yeah. Well, don't let him fool you. The reason they sold out is because he bought them all up. So
Life happens. It comes at you fast. I got a lot of friends who need them. Gentlemen, this was a blast as always. I appreciate you. I look forward to 93. I might wear a flannel just in honor of it. And I will see the two of you next week.
Absolutely.
bye, Dan.
Looking forward to it.
Yes.